Hi, I'm Matthew Lapp, host of Matthew Lapp Train Guy Segment Show. Also today in this segment, I'm at the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad in Durango, Colorado. The Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad is located on 479 Main Avenue in Durango, Colorado. And at the Durango Depot, there's a museum, which it is also in one half of the roundhouse, and the other half is where the operable steam locomotives are in when they're being worked on before they get rolling again or resting for the night. This railroad is what brings a lot of people to Durango, Colorado. Also, the rail line is the former Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. The rail line was built in 1881 and the line is a 3-foot gauge line. William Jackson Palmer, who was a former Union general that was serving in the American Civil War, who came to Colorado after managing the construction of the Kansas Pacific Railroad into Denver in 1870. Also, in 1881, the railroad arrived in Durango, Colorado. Also, the town was founded by the Denver and Rio Grande in 1880, chiefly through the talents and organization of General Palmer's business partner, Dr. William Bell. Construction to Silverton, Colorado began that fall. Just 11 months later, the Denver and Rio Grande reached Silverton on July 10, 1882. The train then started hauling passengers and freight. In 1886, the Denver and Rio Grande Railway soon re-emerged as the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. The train runs between Durango, Colorado and Silverton, Colorado and runs for 45 miles on the rail line, and it used to be a 3-day stagecoach ordeal, and today it is a 3-hour and 40-minute ride up to Silverton, but during the winter time it can only go up to Cascade Canyon, and too snowy to go up to Silverton during the winter though. For many generations they have been running steam trains on these rails. Also, the train runs along the Animus River as well. Also, the High Line is located in the San Juan National Forest, and also back in 1882 men were dangling from ropes to blast the mountain, and the Animus River is just 400 feet straight down. And to build the High Line, workers had to blast 2 miles of cliffs at a cost of $1,000 a foot using black powder, and also there weren't any photos of the High Line construction happening because taking photos of it weren't allowed though. And when you're riding the train on the High Line, you're also getting an experience of the Animus Canyon. Also, the town of Silverton got its name because of silver being mined by the ton, and it is a mining town, and after the wars, the Denver and Rio Grande began a decades-long process of abandoning unprofitable segments of its empire, and Silverton and Durango were threatened because the mines were played out, and Silverton lost 3 railroads that connected the mines and towns around it, and by 1942, only rails in Silverton were the ones leading back to Durango. From 1949 to 1960s, the Silverton branch started to benefit from parts around the world and made movies on the line, such as Ticket to Tomahawk from 1949, Denver and Rio Grande from 1951, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid from 1968, and a lot others as well. In 1960, the railroad was nearly abandoned. In 1970, there was a terrible flood that washed out miles of track, and soon Charles Bradshaw Jr., a Florida citrus grower, saved the railroad and bought the railroad, and he rebuilt the entire railroad and brought steam engines that have been parked over in Alamosa, Colorado for 30 years and to be restored and put them into service. Also in February 1989, there was a roundhouse fire. In 1998, the museum opened and has a lot of railroad memorabilia, and it is a free museum. And also, the Durango and Silverton was then owned and operated by American Heritage Railways. Also, for many years, the train has been taking visitors along the Durango and Silverton narrow gauge railroad, and riding behind a historic steam locomotive just takes you back in time whenever you ride on the railroad. Also, the line from Durango, Colorado to Chama, New Mexico were removed in 1968, and the sister railroad is the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad that runs between Chama, New Mexico and Antonito, Colorado, and that line is the former Denver and Rio Grande Railroad as well. Also, the first 5 strong bridges brings us to the Animus River and was named the Rio de la Animus Verdes, or River of Lost Souls, by the Spaniards, the first Europeans who explored this country when they traveled north from Mexico. Also, the train makes stops to have the steam locomotives fill up with water to get from Durango to Silverton. And when you're passing Shalona Lake, that means you're coming into the Old Frontier Stagecoach stop in Rockwood, Colorado. Then you're entering the San Juan National Forest and seeing the gorge that I just mentioned. Then you're in Cascade Canyon, which, like I said, the train only goes that far during the winter time, but not all the way to Silverton. Also, there is an abandoned sawmill that was built in 1910 and was served by a spur in Taft, and also below it has abandoned mine shafts. Then the train reaches Needleton, Colorado, and it was the center of operations for hundreds of miners. Also in 1927, the Needleton station was washed away in the flood. Also, the train makes a stop in Needleton to have the steam locomotives fill up with water. The train finally reaches Silverton, Colorado, and also this means you can explore the town, grab some lunch, and even watch the trains back up to get turned around. And it even has the Silverton Freight Museum where you could look at the equipment that lives there, and some that are owned by the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad. And also the Silverton Freight Museum is just right before the last curve before the train reaches the end of the line as well. Also, in summer 2018, the steam train was suspended because of the 416 fire, but it was all over and steam was back in action on the railroad. But then another problem hit, which was a mudslide causing the rails to be damaged, so the train had to be suspended for a while till the disaster was taken care of and eventually reopened. Also, back in 2002, there was a Missionary Ridge fire, so the railroad had to temporarily shut down steam service, and eventually steam was once again running on the railroad. Also, the steam engines had been converted to burn oil, but not all of them. Some of them stayed coal burning, and today the train keeps rolling along the line as part of America's treasure as well. Also in 2020, the last bridge that crosses the Animus River before entering Silverton was washed away. But then, later that year, it was announced that it will be repaired.